Okay, let's get started. This is the comic book effect. Um, the goal of this effect is to turn this photograph and then your photographs eventually, but we're going to start with this photograph for our demonstration into something that looks like it came out of a comic book, something that looks like it came right off the Sunday funny papers or right out of a graphic novel or a comic book. And to achieve that, we're going to simplify the color. We're going to add some thick black outlines like the ink lines of a comic book. And then we're going to turn our colored areas into something that looks like a set of dots, those little halftone dots. You've seen them in the comics. They're the little dot pattern that actually makes up the color. And I will say this is the most complicated tutorial that we will do in here all year. There are a lot of steps. So if you feel like you have to pause this video every so often to catch up or run it backwards, that's fine. And you've also got the PDF to follow or the directions to follow on Google Classroom. So starting up, okay, we've got our image opened. You're going to work on this image to begin with for this daily grade. And the very, very first step, and I'd already started this once, but the very first step we're going to do is we're going to duplicate that background layer, and we're going to name it Soften, because we are going to soften this up with a little bit of a blur. Okay, so I've named it Soften. Okay, and we're going to be using a different kind of blur. You've not seen this before, but it's very similar to the ones you've worked with in the past. And it's under Filter, and it's called Surface Blur. It's under Blur, and it is Surface Blur. And the settings that the tutorial is recommending is a radius of 5 and a threshold of 15. And we'll go ahead and put that in. And that's going to blur this layer here. Okay, there it is without the blur, and there it is with the blur. As you can see, what we've done is the blur has taken away a lot of the detail. Okay, so we're done with the soften layer. We're going to move on for a little bit. Okay. So we're going to duplicate the soften layer now. I'm moving on to step 4. Okay, and we're going to desaturate the softened copy. So we're going to do Control or Command Shift U. So Command Shift, Command U desaturates that layer. You could have also gone through Image, Adjustments, Hue Saturation, and you could have pulled the saturation slider all the way down. Either of those give you exactly the same effect, the desaturated or the loss of the color for this layer. All right. So now we should have, and we're going to call this desaturated. We're going to rename it right here. So we have soften, which has been softened up. We copied soften, and we created a desaturated layer. Okay. Now we're going to create a new blank layer, and we're going to call that halftone. So we just do a new blank layer, and we're going to go ahead and name it halftone. And halftone layers or halftones are when newspapers and magazines use that dot pattern to get the printout or get the color. Okay? Now, here's where we just finished step 5. Here's where things get a little interesting. Okay, we're going to go to our RGB or our channels window. So I might go ahead and open that up. And on our channels window, okay, let's try that again. Window, channels. There we go. Okay, we have a channel here for the blues, the greens, the reds, and then all of them together here. Okay, and what we need to do is we need to load what's known as the luminosity or the color of this. And the way we load the luminosity or the color in as a selection is we hold down Control and we click on this right here. Okay. We hold down Command, and we click right here on this. And that gives us a selection, and it's loading up the light areas only. It's loading up the light areas. So that is the end of step 5, getting ready to start step 6. Okay, we have held down Command and we've clicked on this icon for the RGB channel. Okay. Now we're going to be in the halftone layer. That's going to be our active layer. Okay, so we've got the lightness area selected. So what we want to do is we want to get the exact opposite. And there's no way to load the darkness, but since we can load the lightness, we can now go select inverse. Okay, that flips it around. So now we have all the darkness loaded. All right. At the end of step 6, the tutorial says to press D to reset your colors. You can also reset your colors by clicking right here to their default colors. And we're going to fill, on the halftone layer, we're going to fill the dark areas with a dark color. And it's only going to fill partially. So watch how that works. We go to Edit, we go to Fill, and we tell it to fill with black. And we click OK. And that will create for us this. I'm going to go ahead and I'm going to drop my selection. Command D to drop or deselect. And this is what was selected and filled black right here. Okay, so we now have 3 layers. We have halftone, desaturated, and soften. Okay, and I just finished step 6 and I'm moving on to step 7. Okay, so we're all set up to start actually making this now. Okay, we're going to use the soften layer to be the colors of this. So on this soften layer, we're going to apply something called a cutout filter. And what that's going to do for us is it's going to really minimize the colors here. It's going to get rid of all the different shades and it's going to really simplify the colors. So on this layer that we blurred a little bit, we're going to go to Filter, we're going to go to Artistic, we're going to go to Cutout. And the cutout gives us this look right here. Okay? And we're going to set our number of levels to 8. Okay. Edge simplicity to 0. And the edge fidelity is at 3. When I click OK, it goes ahead and it makes this. This is giving us those real super simplified colors that you see in a comic strip. Okay? Now I'm on to step 9. The cutout filter has dulled the colors, so we want them to be a little more vivid. Okay? And we're going to duplicate this layer. And we're going to put this new layers mode in soft or into soft light right here. And what that will do is it will, there we go, it'll really pop those colors up and make them bright. Okay, so we're going to leave it there, and we're going to go ahead and move to the desaturated layer. This is going to be our simplified color, these 2 layers together. Okay, we're going to go ahead and we're going to come up to the desaturated layer. This is where we're going to make our thick outlines. Okay, so we're going to go to Filter, and we're going to go to Artistic, and we're going to go to Poster Edges. And the poster edges, what it does, if you notice, it gives us, it finds the edges of things and makes them really black. Okay, so I've got the poster edges up, and I'm going to set all 3 of these to 1. They're already there. Okay, so this is good. These are going to be the black ink outlines of our comic strip. So when I click OK, I get that effect. But we don't want the gray to show through. We want to see this color showing through underneath. So we're going to set this mode to one called Pin Light. Okay? And Pin Light is, see if I can find it here real quick. There it is. I don't use it very often, but there it is. So now what we have is bright colors, simplified colors, thick outlines. Okay, so we've simplified our colors like a comic strip. We've got the thick outlines like a comic strip. And now it's time to make the dot pattern like a comic strip. Okay? So up here on the halftone layer, okay, we're going to load this in by holding down Command and clicking right here. We're going to load it back in. Okay, we don't necessarily need it to be visible just yet, but I'll go ahead and turn it on. Okay, with the selection loaded in, if we have the selection loaded, I'm going to make a new layer mask. There it is. So it copied that selection into the layer mask. I'm leaving step 14 right now, moving on to step 15. Okay, we want to make sure we're working on the layer mask here. Okay, it'll have small brackets around it, you know that. Okay, I'm going to go to the filter that I'm going to apply to create the comic book effect or the dot pattern effect is Filter, Pixelate, Color Halftone. Okay, and this number is going to change depending on whether you're working with a high resolution image or a low resolution image. You're just going to have to kind of fool around with it and get exactly the effect you want. I found that 8 works fine for this. So there's my color halftone. Yep, actually that's just a little too big, so I'm going to undo that. And what I'm going to do is I'm going to go back and I'm going to try 4. So I'm going to go ahead to Pixelate, Color Halftone. Let's see how 4 looks. I'm going to be a little smaller. There we go. That's perfect. Okay. Now the problem is this is backwards from the way I want it. Okay, so I went to 4. And 4 is as small as you can go. If it looks too big, if it's too big, it's going to look like polka dots. We don't want polka dots. Okay, I'm going to inverse this now with Command-I. And there it is. Okay, that's an important step, inversing while I'm on the halftone layer. And I'm going to change this blend mode to soft light so that it shows through a little better. So there we go. Soft light. So now we're seeing the desaturated or the thick lines all the way through it. We're seeing the simplified colors through the halftone, but we're also seeing the dot pattern that we have created. So we're getting there. We're very close. Okay, I know this looks like a lot of steps, and it is, but it's things you've already done before, and it's things that we're just kind of putting it all together here. Okay? Now, this might be a little darker than we want. So I'm going to lighten this up by going ahead and adding a curves adjustment layer. Okay, so I clicked on my adjustment layer, and there's curves. I'm going to brighten it up a touch. There we go. So my adjustment layer is on top, and I clicked right in the middle, my middle grays, and I pulled those up a little to go ahead and brighten it up just a touch. Okay. And then we're going to make a black outline. I'm going to show you a quicker, easier way than what the tutorial says. So to make my black outline and to make my saying bubbles, and you will have to have saying bubbles or thought bubbles on your comic strip, I'm going to add a new layer. I'm going to select everything, and I'm going to go Edit, and we're going to stroke that, and I will give it a, let's give it, say, a 10 pixel. This may be a little too big on the inside. There we go. Perfect. 10 came out just right. Okay, so I have a new layer. I selected everything with Control A, and then I did Edit Stroke to make the black border. Okay, on this new layer, let's make this kid saying something. So to make a saying bubble, I think what I'll do is I will go ahead and drop my selection. Let's do that. Come back here. I'm going to make an elliptical selection with no feather. Make sure feather is turned off when you do this. So I'm going to make this selection here. And I'm going to hold down Shift because I want to add to this selection. And what I want to add are some polygonal lassos. That's the middle lasso tool. So with Shift held down, I click inside the oval. I point it at the kid's mouth. I come back. I've got Shift held down, so it's going to add this to the selection. And then I go back to where I started, and there it is. So I have this selection that looks like a saying bubble. Now I can go edit and I can go fill. And I'm going to fill that with white. Okay, and I'm on the same layer with the border, so there's my white fill. And then I'm going to go ahead and I'm going to put a black stroke around that. I'm not going to use as thick a stroke. So I'm going to go to Edit, Stroke. And I think I'll just go with, let's say go with 4 pixels. I'll center it, and there it is. Then I'll drop my selection. So now we can actually use our text tool, and I can say, make that just a touch smaller. There we go. Okay, so if you'll look at this, we now have the dot pattern that looks like a comic book, the simplified colors, the thick outlines, and the border for the panel. That's what you call one square of a comic strip. It's called a panel. And we have the saying balloon. And if you want to make thought balloons, you just make other little ellipses there. Put the stroke on them. Fill them with white. But there it is. There's a very convincing looking, looks like it was printed in a comic book photograph. So we're going to take this and we're going to apply it to your next long-term project. If you want to, you can go ahead and flatten this. And now it's all on one layer. Okay? That is your tutorial.